Năm mới vẫn là Extra Value Meals tại McDonald's. Giờ đây thưởng thức sausage McMuffin with egg thơm ngon, thêm khoai hash browns và một ly cà phê nhỏ chỉ $5. For a limited time only, prices and participation may vary. Prices may be higher in Hawaii, Alaska, and California, and for delivery.
Trust and Will is an online estate planning service. Visit trustandwill.com for details.
Trust and Will.
My dad and I were always close, but some things we just didn't talk about, like his will. After he was gone, we found out he didn't have one, and it created a lot of stress during a time of grief.
Creating a will can be hard to think about, but avoiding it can lead to greater difficulty for the people you love. That's why Trust and Will makes estate planning simple. Create a will online in as little as 30 minutes.
Now, I have a will in place to make sure my loved ones are protected. With Trust and Will, it was easy and affordable, and I got peace of mind knowing my wishes are clear.
Trust and Will.
Get 20% off when you visit trustandwill.com/future. That's trustandwill.com/future to get 20% off. trustandwill.com/FUTURE.
A warmer from the low. Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Oops Peterson, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. We've got an excellent podcast for you. We're going to be joined in segment number 2 by a good friend of ours, Matt Josephs, aka Mid-Major Matt. We're going to be chatting with him about what we've all seen here in conference play thus far, some of the things that he's noticing from a team total perspective. We're going to talk a little bit about the Atlantic 10, and we have to dive in on what we're seeing with so many of these games being moved around, some of these scheduling spots, how you want to maneuver those, the sorts of teams that you want to be backing and fading, if they do have a little bit of a switcheroony with regards to their schedule, if they have to deal with some inclement travel, things of that nature. So we're going to have a good time chatting with Matt in segment number 2. In the final segment, going to get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Friday as we hit some bank shots. If you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters CM, name does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. The other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. While I did not get in any Twitter/X questions today, we had ourselves a whale of a day in college basketball on Thursday. Let's take a look back at it, try to find some trends, and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
We did not have any ranked teams in action, but we do now have a team that is 11-2-1 against the spread. That's the second best cover rate in all of college basketball, and that would be Portland State. Nip and tuck game between they and Eastern Washington, but Portland State does find a way to be able to persevere, get the job done by a count of 65-61. For Portland State, they only go 2 of 12 from three-point range, but they made their free throws 11 of 13 at the charity stripe. They win the rebound battle 33-28, and they play even up in the turnover battle 13-13 for Portland State. Scary Terry Miller was able to step up 22 points, and Portland State, they just continue to find a way to be able to get the job done. If you're looking at your most demonstrative over team in all of college basketball, that would be the Pioneers of Denver. They entered in the day having played just one under thus far this season by about a point to a point and a half, depending upon your closing number. They got another under. I believe they're at now 15 overs, 2 unders, and 1 push, but for Denver, they do fall to North Dakota State, and North Dakota State, by the way, they were finding themselves as a 4.5 point favorite, so that fell right on the number as well, but 82-77, the final. It has been a Denver team that has been really good with their three-point shooting offense. They have been less than savory with regards to their three-point shooting defense, and in this one for North Dakota State, 11-26 from 3, 12-28 for the Pioneers, and Zay Nelson, he was zany with his 20 points, but what was the difference for North Dakota State? They win the rebound battle 36-29, and they go 11-15 at the free throw line. Denver hit 75% of their free throws, but they only attempted 4 of them, so that was a little bit less than amazing for them. He had the day start off with some day games because we do have the storms going on, and hopefully if you are in the path of any of these storms that you're all very safe, but that's it for Louisiana Monroe. They continue to be a little bit of a fadeable team, to say the least. They're actually 9-9 against the spread, which I find to be very shocking with the way that they played on Thursday because they got absolutely dump trucked 115-60. Marshall is able to get the win. Marshall 26 out of 52 from 3-point range. range. And you didn't have a single guy score over 17 points for Marshall, just a nice collective there. And for Louisiana Monroe, they won 5 of 27 from 3-point range, and now they get to play Appalachian St in a day game on Friday. So good, clean family fun there. If you're a fan of the Wisconsin Badgers, well, this was good. 98-71. They absolutely take it to Penn State. Penn State 8 of 27 from 3-point range. For Wisconsin, 15 out of 35 from 3. And this Wisconsin team has been a very solid team to the over. They have really cranked up their tempo thus far this season. For Wisconsin, now 12 overs to 7 unders. Not quite Denver style, but still very rock solid. And Louisiana Monroe, I should throw this in here as well. They're now 14 overs to 4 unders as far this season. So they're actually numero dos in terms of the over rate in college basketball. But for Wisconsin, John Blackwell step up with 17 big points. It's a Penn State team that typically generates a lot of turnovers. They played even up 7-7 with that regard. So Wisconsin, a nice quality winner out there. Long Beach State has been a really good over team thus far this season. They entered in the night 12 overs, 4 unders, and a push, but we saw their game against Cal State Fullerton go under. I'm right now doing this with about 4 minutes remaining in the game. It is currently 64-50, so unless if you get an overtime and or one of the most ridiculous things I've ever seen, you're going to be able to get an under there, so perhaps cooling off just a little bit. And then Elon has been a team that has really been able to catch you some overs as well. How about 13 overs to 5 unders? Coastal Conference has had some very interesting teams, to say the least. And for Elon, they were held down by Towson. Towson, who got off to that rough 0-4 start in conference play. They've now won 4 straight, 72-59. Final in this one as Towson, 9 of 23 from 3-point range. Elon just 8 of 24 from the outside, and Elon just very much slowed down in this game. They lose the turnover battle 13-5. And for Towson, Dylan Williamson, 24 big points out of him. So they do find a way to be able to get the job done in that one. You've got a Campbell team that's been pretty solid to the over as well, sticking out there in the Coastal Conference. 12 overs, 5 unders, and a push. And their game against Charleston completely exploded. It was 35-34, Campbell leading at the half. They do fall in this game by a count of 87-83. So Charleston, if you grabbed like the 3.5 overnight, you were able to get there. But for both of these teams, they were able to have a little bit of a barrage of 3-point shooting. For Charleston, they didn't attempt a lot of threes, but they go 4 of 10 from 3. And then Campbell, 13 of 31 from the outside. But Campbell unable to get the job done as they lose the rebound battle 31-29. And on the side of Charleston was Christian Reeves, who had 21.9 rebounds, and Jalen Counter. He countered all that Campbell was able to do with 23 big points, so you were able to get yet another over out of them. Cleveland State has been a really good over team as well. 13 overs to 5 unders as far this season. They were not in action on Thursday, but we did see some other Horizon League action, and UW Milwaukee, ever since you've had Danilo Jovanovic go down with an injury, they've been 1-3 against the spread without him. Robert Morris laid it on them 88-76, and for Youngstown State, win but no cover against UW Green Bay, 88-81 the final, and all of a sudden UW Green Bay has been a solid cover team for you. How about 12-7 against the spread thus far this season? As for UW Green Bay, they were down in this game 6 points at the half, and they were trailing by double figures with like a minute remaining. They somehow, some way are able to go and find a way to cover this game, going 7 of 18 from 3. Youngstown State 16 out of 36 from 3-point range themselves, and for Youngstown State, Chris Carroll, he carrolled all the way to being able to give you 34 points, but a nice quality cover out there. If you're looking at some of your other better cover teams in all of college basketball, obviously Portland State has been very rock solid thus far this season, but how about America's favorite tag team? You don't just get William, you don't just get Mary, you get both, and now you've gotten yourself a 12-5 against the spread mark. They take it to UNC Wilmington, who entered into this game 17-2, 77-70 at the final. For William and Mary, just 9 of 32 from 3, but they held Wilmington to going 10 of 35 from 3-point range. For this bunch in William and Mary, they win the turnover battle 14-10. They do lose the rebound battle 44-36, but did a nice job holding down this Wilmington team inside. Wilmington overall 19 of 58 from the floor. So the duel of both William and Mary continue to go out there. They continue to find a way to be able to get the job done for you. And Long Beach State, they entered in the day 11-5-1 against the spread, unless if we see something dramatic there. That'll go to 11-6-1 against the spread. But Montana State, they've been another team that's been relatively solid in terms of covering numbers. 11-5-1 against the spread. And their game on Thursday, they were able to get the job done against Idaho State by a count of 74-62, as Idaho State just 7 of 25 from 3. Montana State, they go 11 of 27 from 3, play even up on the glass, with that being the kryptonite of Montana State. That's good for them. They won the turnover battle 9-6 as well, and Jed Miller and Patrick McMahon, main two guys for this team, a combined 39 points, so they were able to find a way to be able to get a good, clean, quality cover out there, and this has been a team that has been able to get to some good, clean, quality covers as well. North Dakota State, 13-7 win against the spread. Mentioned the fact that they got the job done against the Denver Pioneers, and Denver, by the way, is actually 11-6-1 against the spread, so they've been a solid team. If you're looking at a team that has been the exact opposite for you thus far this season, well, it has not been a great run of things for our good friends in East Carolina. Now 5-13 against the spread. They were unable to cover about 24 hours ago and just added to the board late. They're going to be in action on Friday, so we shall see how they're going to be able to respond. And Florida Gulf Coast is going to be another one of those teams that's in a back-to-back. They're now 5-13 against the spread, as Austin Peay, the Governators, were able to land-base them and won the day games that we did see on Thursday for Austin Peay, 83-62. The final, Florida Gulf Coast, a relatively solid three-point shooting team, goes just 6 of 21 from three-point range. Meanwhile, for Austin Peay, they go 12 of 31 from three-point range, and Austin Peay, the name of the game for them is winning the turnover battle. Well, they did so on this day. They won the turnover battle by a count of 18-8, so that was very nice, rock solid for them. Another team that has been pretty rock solid in terms of not covering numbers for you thus far this season, that'd be our good friends over there at North Alabama. And North Alabama, it's just been all sorts of less than tremendous for them. They were not in action on Thursday, but they were either in action on Wednesday, and they did not get the cover against Queens NC, 87-62. That was a result that I did not recap from yesterday, so I had to clean that one up because they have been less than great. I mentioned Milwaukee a little bit before, now 7-13 against the spread. Youngstown State with their non-cover against UW Green Bay, albeit a little bit of a hairbrained one, 6-11-1 against the spread. And then you've got Omaha now at 6-11 against the spread, as Omaha in a little bit of a surprising slog. They are unable to pull this one out going back to Wednesday, as they lost to South Dakota 68-64, the final in that one. I'm not sure why I forgot that one, but yeah, for Omaha, it's not necessarily been an amazing season for them. And then if you're looking at some of your top under teams in all of college basketball, many of them do reside out there in the Metro Atlantic. Hawaii is your top under team, and I do have to have this up at midnight Pacific, 3 o'clock a.m. Eastern. 3 overs to 12 unders going into their game against Cal State Bakersfield. Meet me for the Roadrunners, so we will see if that continues. But Canisius has been 5 overs to 13 unders thus far this season, and a little bit of Metro Atlantic play. They were held down by Sacred Heart 69-66 the final. Now Sacred Heart is unable to get the cover, but for Canisius, they go 12 of 30 from three-point range, but bottom 10 team in terms of total possessions per game, and lots of squandered possessions in this game. As for Canisius, 4 of 7 at the free throw line, 6 of 12 from Sacred Heart. For Sacred Heart, they do lose the turnover battle 12-11, but they were able to have in this game Niall Ralph Byer go 4 of 8 from three-point range, 19 points to be able to stave off the outright upset, but that was yet another under for Canisius. This team has been playing a lot of unders as well. Southern Indiana, they score 51 points in an overtime game, a game that really just dragged college basketball back to the dark ages. They do lose this one by a count of 59-51 against Eastern Illinois. For Eastern Illinois, they win this game despite going 2 of 12 from three-point range, as Southern Indiana 4 of 28 from 3, and now they're going to have to play a back-to-back against Western Illinois. Western Illinois, by the way, they lose, but they do cover against Morehead State, 71-66 final in that one, so we shall see what we're going to be getting on that front. And then this team has also been able to do a pretty rock-solid job in terms of cashing unders. Maine, as they were able to Maine Albany. It was a really rough, grody game. If you were watching this one, I do salute you, but hey, for Maine, they do find a way to be able to get a win, this by a count of 52-49, as for Maine, they were down 33-24 at the half. They outscore Albany in the second half, 28-16. Albany, 4 of 23 from 3. Maine, 3 of 14 from three-point range. Not great, to say the least. And Maine wins the turnover battle 12-7, so that allowed them to be able to get the job done, win that game outright as a very slim underdog. So yay verily to them, and yay verily to yet another under. I was mentioning Towson a little bit before. Now they're at 6 overs to 13 under, so they're another team that's been very rock solid to the under as well. And Iona, 7 overs to 14 unders. I mentioned it, the Metro Atlantic teams have been very good to the under, and they were, for some reason, the underdog against Merrimack. Now, it was harebrained, it was crazy, but they do get the win against Merrimack, this by a count of 61-60, as for Merrimack, 5 of 18 from three-point range. Merrimack actually wins the rebound battle 38-30. They are awful on the glass, but Iona goes 11 of 28 from three-point range, and Merrimack 7 of 12 at the free throw line. When you lose a game by 1 point, that's exactly where you need to be pointing to first and foremost. And I have to mention Mount St. Mary's being a good under team as well. 7 overs to 13 unders thus far this season, and for the Mount, they get just mounted by Quinnipiac, 77-62 the final, so you're able to get a nice clean under there. As for Mount St. Mary's, just so sloppy with the ball thus far this season. They lose the turnover battle 16-9, and They shot it okay. They shoot 7 of 20 from three-point range, but all the squandered possessions, that really left them in the abyss. And for Quinnipiac, they go 10 of 22 from three-point range. And Zot, the UC Irvine Anteaters, this should come as no surprise. They've been a pretty good under team. Right now, they're trying to put the finishing touches on UC Riverside. Midway through the second half, they're up 63 to 44. If you were looking at that closing number, as I do have to have this up by midnight Pacific, so I'm unable to give you the exact final there. But for Irvine, they close in this game as about an 8 to 8.5 point favorite, that total of 142.5. Right now, it's trending a little bit more to the over, but still, with this Irvine team, they entered in the night 6 overs to 11 unders thus far this season, so we shall see what is going to be happening on that front. And if you're taking a look at trend-wise, what we're getting in college basketball right now, it has been a very 50-50 season overall to the overs and the unders, and over the last 7 days, it's been a little bit more underwhelming. We have seen the under now hit at about 53.5%. This is with a few games pending, 175 unders, 152 overs, and the underdogs just continue to hit. 176 and 151 against the spread over the last 7 days for 53.8%, and overall for the season, underdogs now hitting at 51.3%, 1,678 and 1,593. Meanwhile, the underrated in college basketball for the season, 50.1%, 1,640 unders to 1,632 overs. So that's where we're seeing college basketball right now, and that's where we're getting trend-wise. Coming next, how about if we do chat it up with our good friend Matt Josephs, aka Major Matt, right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Craig Peterson, now a part of the Decent Family Podcast.
Trust and Will is an online estate planning service. Visit trustandwill.com for details.
Trust and Will.
My dad and I were always close, but some things we just didn't talk about, like his will. After he was gone, we found out he didn't have one, and it created a lot of stress during a time of grief.
Creating a will can be hard to think about, but avoiding it can lead to greater difficulty for the people you love. That's why Trust and Will makes estate planning simple. Create a will online in as little as 30 minutes.
Now, I have a will in place to make sure my loved ones are protected. With Trust and Will, it was easy and affordable, and I got peace of mind knowing my wishes are clear.
Trust and Will.
Get 20% off when you visit trustandwill.com/future. That's trustandwill.com/future to get 20% off. trustandwill.com/FUTURE.
Side edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word.com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Craig Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast, and it's always great to be joined by this man, as we've got Matt Josephs, aka Mid-Major Matt, aboard. He does such great work at a wide variety of different places, whether that be the show Border over on ESPN Radio Richmond, the Prop Queen website, the Prop Queen app. I know that he's doing a great job there, and I know that he's dialed into what we're all getting in college basketball, and also feverishly getting set for baseball season as well. You're able to follow him on the old Twitter /X and Mid-Major Matt all together. And Matt, always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
Always a pleasure to talk to you as I get set for this snowstorm coming up this weekend.
Absolutely. And how about if we do start there? Because we've got some surprise games that are coming onto the board for Friday. And trust me, I am not complaining about it. When you can have over 150 games get whittled down a little bit for Saturday, that's a good thing, and be able to space those out a little bit. But how do you take a look at some of these games that were supposed to be on like Saturday or Sunday that are now going to be played on Friday?
Well, I think it obviously benefits the home team a little bit more because they are home. Their schedules are changed a little bit, but they don't have to travel anywhere. And I think, a lot of these cases, some of these teams probably were already in their respective locations already. And so moving up a time doesn't necessarily affect things a little bit. But it's always, something, because we know that basketball players, football players, athletes in general they have a habit. They do things. They lift weights at certain times. They take a nap before games. They eat at certain times. And it's getting thrown off a little bit. So you certainly want to look potentially at more veteran teams that could potentially handle something like this. And you certainly want to look at the home teams. And then also, we're getting the weird tip-off times. There are several noons and some 1 o'clocks and things like that. And we assume that there still should be a solid student presence, but you're also getting different times. How does a player handle a new routine playing a noon start time on a Friday as opposed to a Saturday or Sunday? So it's something that I really have to love something in order to play it, because, there's just so many unknowns when it comes to moving a game up a day or two.
Absolutely. And what else is unique about some of these as well is we're going to see a few teams playing a back-to-back, because we're seeing if Louisiana Monroe just got dump trucked on Thursday against Marshall. They lose by 55 points. And now, hey, you thought that was bad? You get to play against Appalachian St here on Friday. And I think that's really interesting to take a look at those teams, because typically the only time you play in a back-to-back is either in a multi-team event during Thanksgiving or during a conference tournament. Now you both have to deal with travel and the back-to-back spot, and I think for these teams like Louisiana Monroe, that's just brutal.
Yeah, I would think for a lot of these Thursday, Saturday type weekends, the teams are already traveling to their next location, so I think that at least helps a little bit. Now, granted, how is Louisiana Monroe going to handle coming off of getting blown out by Marshall in that last game? Now, the one thing that may benefit them is Marshall is a faster paced team. Appalachian State's one of the slowest paced teams. They won't be as tired if they play in a slower paced game the second day afterwards. So I think that kind of helps. But obviously, the Warhawks are not very good. They only have one Division I win so far this season. But they were already heading to Boone after the Marshall game anyway.
Yep, absolutely. And I do think that those are going to be some things to very much be taken a look at, as Matt Josephs, aka Major Matt, is joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops. And we do have in my opinion, very interesting card for Friday, as we're going to have a little bit of everything. We've got a little bit of Big East, a little Big Ten, a little bit of Atlantic 10, and there are a few teams out there towards your neck of the woods that are going to be playing. And I know you're dialed into the Atlantic 10 with being out there in Richmond. And how do you take a look at this St. Bonaventure versus St. Louis game? Because St. Louis now gets ranked, not necessarily the greatest second half against Duquesne, but they stave off elimination. Now they play against a St. Bonaventure team that I think you know as well as I do. They've got a great home court advantage. They have a coach in Dr. Schmidt that knows what he's doing, but it just doesn't feel like a vintage St. Bonaventure team this season.
When you look at this home court advantage, as you mentioned, it is a really tough one. The loss to Richmond, none of the students were there. The loss to Fordham, the students weren't there either, but you really shouldn't lose at home to Fordham. I do kind of trust Mark Schmidt in any sort of situations. And you look at St. Louis, it probably, as we look at it after the fact, becoming ranked and then hitting the road to play Duquesne before a spotlight game on Friday should have probably been a situation to bet on Duquesne. I think after playing so poorly at Duquesne, I think Josh Schertz is going to have his team's attention in this sort of situation. So I think we see a better team. Their defense wasn't very good in Duquesne, and they've played some higher scoring games away from home, it seems like. Now, granted, they've carried a lot of that total because they've scored a lot of points away from home, but I could certainly see this being a little bit of a higher scoring game. St. Bonaventure is a very good three-point shooting team. They're very good at the free throw line, and they're very bad defensively. So I could see these two teams putting on a little bit of a show. I do find it funny that the first two Atlantic 10 spotlight games haven't exactly been the best, because Loyola Chicago and Dayton was a 27-point game, and obviously St. Bonaventure isn't exactly what the best this conference has to offer.
Yep, it is going to be interesting to take a look at this one, and it's just been a fascinating conference in general, because we have noticed a few teams beating up on one another. I'm sure that you know about this very well from Wednesday with Richmond just not being able to pull out that game against Rhode Island. And just what do you make out of this conference right now? Because I think it's hard to dispute St. Louis being that top team, but George Mason going out there, getting the job done, having only one loss himself, that is very good. Meanwhile, you've got a Dayton team that has been rock solid, but man, that loss against LaSalle a few days ago. Feels like that's going to be costly for them moving forward.
Yeah, they were down 33-8 to LaSalle in the first half of that game. It was brutal to kind of watch as it goes along. But of course, you always seem to trust Dayton, although this doesn't seem like as much of a really good Dayton Flyers team as they have in the past. And they're certainly always tough to beat at home. They have a very tough game on Saturday at St. Joe, which I'm wondering if maybe that gets moved up. It's a 6 o'clock start time right now. Philadelphia is supposed to get hammered by snow, so maybe that gets some changes. You look at some of the other team scores at top. I really like this VCU team, but VCU, every sort of tough game they've had this season, except for Virginia Tech, they've lost. So this is a really good team that I think will still be a factor in the conference tournament. They've got a road game against Davidson on Saturday, and then the quick turnaround at home against Richmond in the rivalry game. I don't know if that game's going to get played on Tuesday, depending upon what the ice situation is. Will there be power from this storm? There's supposed to be a lot of ice as part of this storm, and so there's going to be some power outages. Will that game get played on Tuesday? And, they've got a game on Friday and coming up against Loyola Chicago as part of that package. Do they move the Richmond game back, and then it kind of throws everything off schedule-wise for VCU? So, there's some interesting things there with regards to that. And then, of course, you mentioned George Mason. George Mason is a team that has a really good record. Their non-conference schedule wasn't exactly the best. They lost their toughest game to Virginia Tech. I saw Braden O'Connor starting basketball activities this week, so I think that's going to be fun. And then, of course, there's my team, the Revs, the team I really liked before the season. They're the team I think you'll be happy to see on your side of the bracket because they certainly lose games that they're not supposed to, but they also have a tremendous amount of firepower on offense. It's just they're wildly inconsistent so far.
Yep, it has been really interesting to look at that George Washington team. The loss to Delaware, that was not necessarily so great to say the least, but they held in there against Florida earlier in the season as well. So, we have seen the best of times and the worst of times for the Revolutionaries. And you bring up something so interesting as you're talking about the Atlantic 10. You always want to be taking a look at scheduling spots in college basketball. I don't think that I'm revealing trade secrets there, but that said, how much more important is it the next few days with all the snow coming in, with all the ice that you were alluding to, because you mentioned it, there might be some funky travel spots, there might be some scheduling snafus, and I do think that this week, more so than pretty much any other time throughout the year, unless we get some other big giant snowstorm, you do want to be taking a look at these teams that are impacted by travel.
It's the travel situation, it's how veteran of a team you have, how veteran of a coach you have. This is something a little bit different. Some teams, I hope this doesn't happen, but somebody could get stuck at their location and have to stay a little bit longer until, the effects of the storm disappear. I'm very concerned for VCU traveling down the Davidson and playing a 5 o'clock game. Now, that could change. I hope it gets changed. But let's say they play the game, they finish at 7:15 or so. You got to get ready and leave at 8 o'clock. Well, the storm is already underway in Richmond, Virginia. So travel could be a bit of an issue here. So this is certainly where, you want veteran teams that are okay with this sort of things. You want teams that maybe are staying home during this time. And you also really need to read the newspapers. You really need to read the clippings on the websites and stuff like that to see how teams are handling it. Are they leaving early? Are they leaving really close to tip time? And you might have to worry about them a little bit. So this is where you want to trust the coaches, the Mark Schmitz, as you just mentioned, the Josh Schertzes, the Chris Mooney's at times in terms of being veterans, things like that. You don't want these new rookie coaches with these new rosters and things like that having to handle something that's brand new for their team.
I think that's so well said by you, as Matt Josephs, aka Mid-Major Matt. He is joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, and no doubt that is a big part of the handicap for here the next few days, for the next week or so. And just as you've been taking a look at college basketball, have there been a few things that you've been picking up on and things that you've been looking to bet on a little bit more? Because I know that you're a big team totals guy. I know that you're big in terms of taking a look at teams that are either demonstratively good on offense or demonstratively bad on defense. Has there been anything that's been standing out to you the last few weeks?
Well, obviously, as I talked about last time I was on, and it still continues to hold form, Creighton first half overs. Creighton has a very potent offense. Their defense is not as good as it has been. And so we've seen a lot of high-scoring first halves. Look at that Xavier game. It was 42-39 at halftime. And so at home, I really like this team to kind of go and play some solid basketball. So we've been playing a lot of those. Obviously, Denver overs. That's been great this season. It's funny because Denver is one of the schools that follows follows me on Twitter. I always appreciate that from the Pioneers, but their overs have been very profitable so far this season. Bellarmine overs have been pretty good so far this season. They've been improved offensively, but the defense still hasn't been there. So it's really trying to find these situations and these spots. If a certain team is better on the road, it's almost like how you play Colorado Rockies games different in Coors Field and certainly away from Coors Field. Some of these teams have such drastic splits of home and road.
Oh, and I always look at that in the Big Ten as well. Are there any specific conferences for you? Because the one that stands out when you mentioned that, the Big Ten, there's just so many teams that it feels like on offense they score 20 points more per 100 possessions at home rather than on the road, and vice versa with regards to the defense. That's one thing that really comes to mind for me. It feels like that's the one conference where it really reigns supreme more than any other.
Well, and as I've always said, like tempos are more decided at home. So therefore, the faster teams playing slower teams, more often than not, it feels like at home, they're able to instill their pace. They're able to play at such a nature. And you look like, St. Thomas this year, I mean, granted, they're scoring over 90 points on everybody, but at home, as of late, they've been absolutely running through teams and doing a very good job. Now, granted, they still do it somewhat on the road, but they're coming off the loss at North Dakota State. I really like this Tommy's team, especially at home. You look at those last couple, 99 against South Dakota, 92 against Denver, 92 against UC Riverside. So, that's a team that I'm really trying to hone in on at home and, play them a little bit differently on the road, where their offense is still pretty good, but certainly not 90 points good.
That is so well said by you, and that's a team that I've been taking a look at quite a bit as well. The St. Thomas bunch has been one that got off to a little bit of a slow start with their three-point shooting. They're not necessarily a team that's going to gun it, but this is a team that's just so efficient on offense. They always do a great job in terms of taking care of the ball, doing this ahead of their Thursday result, but they certainly have been a great offense there. And is there anything for you that's really standing out on Friday? We did mention that St. Bonaventure versus St. Louis game, and hey, by the time this podcast uploads, we might actually have more games to choose from than we currently have right now. But that said, anything that really caught your eye for the Friday card?
UMass and Buffalo is a very interesting game. Buffalo was so good. They started out the season 13-2, and then they kind of hit the really good part of the conference, and they lost 4 games in a row. I'd love to know where their confidence is kind of at right now after all those games. Now, look, you play Ohio, Kent State, Miami, Ohio, and Akron back to back to back to back. You're going to lose some games because those are the best teams in the MAC. You're getting a UMass team coming in that who knows what's up with UMass. I don't know how much they're enjoying their time in this conference. They did start out 0-4. Now they're 3-5. So they are at least getting a little bit better in conference. So that has potential to be a really fun game. I think we'll learn early on as to how Buffalo is handling it. I know UMass is the road favorite in this game. I might potentially take a look at Buffalo, but it could also be one of those things where I watch the first 4 or 5 minutes and see how they're looking. Do they look like a team that's lost a little bit of confidence as of now? UMass has some talent. They just don't play very much defense themselves. And then, of course, I'll be interested to see what the line will be in the Longwood Charleston Southern game and some of these games that have been moved to Friday. Will we get some lines that are heavily skewed towards the home team? I think this is a pretty solid Longwood team under their new head coach, Ronnie Thomas. They're a team that certainly benefits at home. And, being a game that's played on Friday night, are we going to get a better crowd from the students? Or are the students going to be ready for the Friday weekend and they don't show up? So I'll be really interested to see what the lines are for that. Radford coming off of a really tough loss as they play High Point. And then, of course, the early games, Austin Peay at home, Lipscomb at home, both 1 o'clock start times. What are those lines like? And which of those teams kind of adjust to the fact that they're playing a 1 o'clock game on Friday, which is something not a lot of teams do?
Yep, and especially for the few teams that are playing back-to-backs and playing in the AM as well, that is going to be especially difficult for them. So there's a lot to decipher on this card, and Matt, I know that you're doing a great job of taking a look at that. You're doing a great job getting prepared for the baseball season. You do such great work on so many different fronts, so love to get people at home know what's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, I'm on the Prop Queen website. I do a lot for Ariel's website. I'm on her podcast on Fridays. I post all my plays. You can track them on the Action Network app. Certainly want to be transparent. As you said, baseball's coming up, getting ready for that. Looking forward to all the K-props and all that fun stuff. And I'm certainly here to answer any questions. As you've mentioned, I love looking at the smaller markets, team totals, first half team totals, player props, things like that. I know that's sometimes stuff that you get asked about. You can certainly ask me on Twitter at MidMajorMatt, and I can try and help out because we all have the same goal. We all want to beat the books.
Absolutely. And Matt, he does such an excellent job looking at so many different fronts, whether that be baseball, baseball, basketball, football, you name it, he does it. And every single time he joins me, lots of such great insights. So big thanks to Matt for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And coming next, it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this College Basketball Friday as we hit some bank shots.
Năm mới vẫn là extra value meals tại McDonald's. Giờ đây thưởng thức sausage McMuffin with egg thơm ngon, thêm khoai hash browns và một ly cà phê nhỏ chỉ $5. For a limited time only, prices and participation may vary. Prices may be higher in Hawaii, Alaska, and California, and for delivery.
And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by Matt Josephs, aka Mid-Major Matt, doing great work over at ESPN Radio Richmond, the Prop Queen website, the Prop Queen podcast, and so much more every single time he joins me. Learned such great insights and did so once again today. So big thanks to Matt for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this College Basketball Friday as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that as per usual, any changes are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at @GNet_D1. I feel like with the order of these games, it's like, whose line is it anyway? Where everything's made up, and in this case, they always used to say the points don't matter. In this case, the time doesn't matter because we've had so many scheduling changes that it's not even funny. We've got games that were supposed to be on Saturday getting moved to Friday as I do this, so there might be some inserts along the way as well. Some of the games that got inserted for Friday just went to the top of the board. Some of them went to the bottom of the board. So if you're listening on the old Twitter/X, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Google, list goes on and on. I always list the time markers for each game and the order that it goes in. So that should help you out a little bit because in this case, they really did us no favors because it's a mess. But how about if we get things started? 8:47, 8:48 on the card. We start with the 7:30 p.m. Eastern time game. Go figure. Tulane is going to be on the road against Charlotte. Charlotte does find themselves as a 3.5 to a 4-point favorite. Total on this game 143 to 143.5, and set total of 143.5. I was seeing a 144 earlier, and personally between a 143 and a 144, I would take a 144 under rather than a 143 over, mainly because Charlotte is just so stinking slow. 336th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Tulane has really slowed themselves down as well, 248th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and it's a Tulane bunch that has been getting gashed from three-point range, 267th in the country in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. But here's a real kicker for this Tulane team, and the reason why they are being heavily faded here. Tulane, in terms of offensive rebound percentage, 349th in the country. They grab 20.8% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. Charlotte, at home, they're grabbing 35.7% of their misses as an offensive rebound. That's a top 100 mark in all of college basketball. Anton Boynke, who comes over from Providence, has been very good for this team. He's right now supplying you with about 10.5 points, 8.5 boards, and at 7'2", he actually shoots right around 35% from three. Ben Bradford, your top scorer, is a great three-point shooter at about 25%, but 14 points, 3 boards. Desane Mingo has helped this team be relatively efficient on offense, 10.5 points, 4 assists per contest, and then likes of Damani Harrison, Darren Converse, these guys have been pretty rock solid in terms of adding in there some contributions. Now, this is a Charlotte team that's getting absolutely gashed from three-point range or outside the top 280 in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, and this is a Tulane bunch that has one of the most funky splits that you're going to find with regards to their three-point shooting. For Tulane at home, they are right now shooting less than 28.5% for three-point range at home. That goes to 38.5% in a road/shoot court venue, so puzzle me that. But that said, this is a bunch of Tulane that is probably going to have the top scorer in this game, Rowan Brumbaugh. He's been able to give you over 17.5 points per contest from three-point range. He's popping in and locking it at a clip of about 39 or so percent. Throws in there about 5 rebounds per game, but you get no rebounding out of this team. Brumbaugh gives you about 3.5 assists per game, and Tulane, top 125 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. They're a top 40 team with their free throw shooting percentage at 77%, but they don't do a lot down low. They're outside the top 250 themselves in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, and it is a Charlotte team that, if they find themselves in a little bit of a sticky spot as well, they shoot about 71.5% of the free throw line. That's about country average, but with this Charlotte team, they've done a pretty solid job themselves in terms of not turning the ball over, though they themselves outside the top 300 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. But I think that's going to be a little bit of a slowed down game. Tyler Ringgold, he gives you about 9 points, 4.5 rebounds per game. You get 4.5 boards out of Scotty Bell Middleton as well, but not a lot of depth with this Tulane team. And I do think that Charlotte is going to be able to find a way to slow this game down. They're going to be able to control the boards. I think that Charlotte wins from within. Set them as a 7.5 point favorite. So one to lay with Charlotte, and I'm going to be in on a 144 or higher to the under. 849, 850 on the card. Middle Tennessee is on the road against Jacksonville State. Jacksonville State, we have yet to see if they're going to be a favorite or an underdog. This was a game that was added very, very late, and bookmakers have yet to put out a line, but I've got my handicap. I said Jacksonville State as a 1 point favorite, so essentially I'm going to be taking the underdog in this spot. If it's Jacksonville State, I'm just going to take them on the money line outright. If it's Middle Tennessee, whatever small amount of points I'm able to get. So I'm just essentially taking the underdog here. And then 130.5 or less, I'm in on the over. 131.5 or higher, the under. As you got a Jacksonville State team as playing at one of the slowest paces in all of college basketball out of 365 Division I teams. Right now they are checking in a nice hearty 343rd in terms of total possessions per game. Meanwhile, you've got a Middle Tennessee team that they themselves are not really going to be looking to gun it or anything like that. This Middle Tennessee team, in terms of total possessions per game, 239th in all of college basketball. Middle Tennessee, they're not necessarily like a flamethrower from three-point range, but they're solid. They shoot about 35.6% from three. This goes down to about 33.5% in a roadside shoot score venue. They've been a top 125 team in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage as well. Jacksonville State, they typically pride themselves on the glass, and they should have a little bit of an advantage here. And Jacksonville State at home, they shoot 37.5% from three. That's a top 125 mark in all of college basketball. And for Middle Tennessee, it is sort of a whole is greater than the sum of its parts collective, as you've got a quartet of guys who have been able to give you between 9.2 and 13.1 points per contest. Kamari Lands, 13 points, shoots 36.5% for three. Torrey Ellison, lone guy on the roster other than Chris Lufay, who gives you over 4.1 rebounds per game. Between the two of them, you do get about 14 rebounds per game, but 12.5 points, a little bit over a block per contest out of him. And then Jevin Carter throws in there about 11.5 points per game, but it is a team that has been a little bit hit or miss with regards to the offense because they are outside the top 200 themselves in terms of their own two-point shooting percentage. They don't allow a lot of second and third chances on glass. They themselves don't grab a lot of second and third chances. And then on the flip side for Jacksonville State, you've got Mustafa El Montequio, who he comes over from Louisiana. He's been the main man for the team, 18.5 points, 7.5 rebounds per game. He doesn't necessarily pop it well from three, but you've got Jacoby Hill, who gives you about 8.5 points, shoots 40% from three. AC Bryan shoots 40% from three, 13.5 points per contest. Emma Derrick, Erikins Ford has been able to do a nice job throwing there about 4 boards per contest as well. With Jacksonville State, this is a team that is going to be very much looking to win this game from within, and they don't want to go to the free throw line. As Jacksonville State, they shoot about 67% of the free throw line. That is well outside the top 300 in all of college basketball, but this has been a team that's been very good with regards to both their two-point shooting percentage defense and their three-point shooting percentage defense. Jacksonville State, just not a team that's really going to generate a lot of turnovers outside the top 250 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but at home, teams only shoot about 29.7% from three-point range against them. That's a top 100 mark in all of college basketball, and they've been able to do a pretty solid job on the post as well. As right now, teams are shooting only about 49.5% from two-point range. That's a top 110 mark in all of college basketball. I think that that's just enough to get it done, even though they do have that bad free throw shooting at Middle Tennessee. On the flip side, in a pressure spot, they are shooting about 69.2% at the free throw line. So 130.5 or less, and on the over 131.5 or higher, the under, with Jacksonville State willing to take them as a money line underdog / willing to lay up to 1 point with them. For Middle Tennessee, anything more than a point, I'm going to be willing to take the points with them. 861, 862 on the card. Yeah, we've got a big skip because this is a random board, but that's at Kennesaw State. We give our Lane Kiffin go Owls. They are going to be on the road against Louisiana Tech, and Louisiana Tech, depending on your book, is either a 1 point favorite or a 1 point underdog. And so on this game, you're going to be finding it in the low 140s, anywhere between 144 to a 145, and I did set my total of 141. I'm in on the under. I recognize that Kennesaw State is one of the fastest teams in all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game. They check in number 6 in the country. I think that Simeon Cottle being now out for the season because he was a part of the whole gambling sting that we saw a week ago from the FBI, that's going to be affecting them, and that was their top scorer for him also being the point guard. He was giving you about 4 assists, 20.5 points per contest, shot 37.5% from three for a team that they really like to bump up the tempo. Now, they still have a forte of being a good offensive rebounding team. They're a top 35 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, and you still have a quartet of guys that give you at least 4.8 rebounds per game. Ramon Seals, Trey Simpson, Brandon Skip-to-my-Lou, and Franquan Sherman, with Sherman 8.5 points, 8.5 rebounds per game. You've been able to have Simpson shoot about 39.5% from three. He gives you about 10 points per contest. Seals gives you 10.5 points, 5.5 rebounds, but now he's out of the fold as well, dealing with a little bit of injury, so that leaves this team a little bit more shorthanded. So with them having fewer bodies, I do think that that's going to slow them down a little bit. And this is a Louisiana Tech team that they have been very, very awful with regards to their offense. They're outside the top 275 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but a very rock solid team on defense. They're about 90th in the country in terms of the opponent's 2-point shooting percentage, and they do not allow you to be able to get good looks from 3-point range whatsoever. In terms of opponent's 3-point shooting percentage, right now they are a top 110 team with that regard. At home, teams are only shooting 30.7% from 3-point range against them. Now for Louisiana Tech, they're not necessarily canning their own shots. They're shooting less than 30% from 3, and it's outside the top 340 in all of college basketball. But your top two guys, and DJ turned it up to Dudley, AJ Bates, they've been able to combine for 24.5 points per contest between the two of them. They shoot about 38% from 3-point range, and then you got Keaton Cooper, who's able to give you 7 boards, 9 points per contest. Avery Thomas II, he throws in there about 6.5 rebounds per game. You've been able to have a lot of mixing and matching in terms of guys that are able to give you a few rebounds. Someone like Jalen Fenner only gives you like 5 points per game, but he throws in there a steal per game as well. It is a Louisiana Tech team that's about a country average team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, just simply not executing on offense. But they, much like this Kennesaw State team, have been a good team in terms of being able to generate for themselves some second and third chances in terms of offensive rebound percentage. Louisiana Tech, they are number 80 in all of college basketball at home. They grab about 34.9% of their misses as an offensive rebound, and you take a look at the overall efficiency, so only about 319th in the country in terms of points per possession, but they are scoring about 18.2 points more per 100 possessions at home rather than away from home. I did still set Kennesaw State as that 1-point favorite, mainly because I just have a tough time trusting in this Louisiana Tech team to put up enough points on the board. So with Kennesaw State, if they are an underdog, going to take them on the money line, otherwise willing to lay up to 1 with them, and I'm in on the under. I set my total at a 141, 863, 864. East Carolina is going to be on the road against North Texas. North Texas is a favorite here of 10 to 10.5 points. 134.5 to 135.5 is the total, and I'm going to be willing to take a shot on the under. I set mine at a 128.5. East Carolina is just not executing on offense. Out of 365 Division I teams in a road or neutral court venue, East Carolina 361st in terms of points per possession. Now, they're not necessarily playing slow. They're about 137th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. North Texas, they are playing slow. 311th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. And North Texas, they themselves, not necessarily some sort of an offensive dynamo in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Right now for North Texas, they are checking into our 99th in the country. That does ascend to 172nd at home. They're scoring over 20 points more per 100 possessions at home rather than away from home, and that's a big reason why I'm willing to lay it. I did set them as a 12.5 point favorite. East Carolina, they're not taking care of the ball. 260th in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis away from home. North Texas is a top 12 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, and the rebounding for East Carolina is actually quite good. This is a team that does check in the top 225 in terms of rebound percentage. They grab quite a few second and third chances. They give up quite a few second and third chances, and Jordan Riley is a good go-to scorer. 22 points, 5.5 boards. He throws in there nearly 2 steals per contest. His 29% three-point shooting, though, among guys that have played in at least 10 games thus far this season, that is actually the top mark for this group, and that is just so incredibly sad. You've got Tabo Bailey, who gives you 7.5 points per contest in the backcourt, and then Giovanni Amaruju, 9.5 rebounds, 13.5 points per game, but you just have a bunch of Jags outside of that, just a guys. And on the flip side for North Texas, they've been dealing with quite a few injuries of their own. The UCLA/San Jose State transfer that was supposed to uplift them, and Will McClendon went out after 4 games, so Jushaun Stevenson has had to take ownership of the offense. Pair of steals, 17 points per contest, shoots about 33% from 3, and you've had Kamai Gosby, who he doesn't give you a lot of scoring with only about 3 points per contest, but now he's giving you 39% three-point shooting off the bench. David Terrell is starting to step up for the team, give you about 13 rebounds, 5 assists, really doesn't turn the ball over a ton. Now North Texas is sloppy with it as well. They are outside the top 280 themselves in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, but with them being so good in terms of generating turnovers, and this being a North Texas team that they absolutely lock you down from 3-point range. They're a top 30 team in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. They're overall 35th in the country in terms of points per possession allowed on defense, and East Carolina horrible with regards to their three-point shooting offense and defense. Right now in games played away from them, they shoot a nice hearty 25% from 3-point range. They're really not doing a great job in terms of guarding the arc as well. Right now for East Carolina, they're allowing teams to shoot 36.4% from 3 overall, 38.8% away from them. I do think that North Texas is going to go out there, dump truck this team. I set my line at 12.5. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Made a total of 128.5, so I'm also in on the under. 865, Sweet 66. Citadel's on the road against East Tennessee. East Tennessee does find themselves as a good-sized favorite here, as you're going to be laying with them between 17 to 17.5 points. 140 to 140.5 is the total. Sub total 138.5. I do like the under. Now the Citadel well outside the top 325 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but they're playing so stinking slow. 324th in terms of total possessions per game. In East Tennessee, they are a rock-solid defense, and they're playing just as slow. 302nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. East Tennessee has been able to do a nice job with regards to their interior defense, and they're still a top 120 team in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage as well. So it's a very well-rounded defense that has gotten much, much better in terms of generating turnovers as well. In terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, East Tennessee is right now 44th in all of college basketball. The Citadel, 350th. So East Tennessee is not going to be under any duress whatsoever. And for the Citadel, they were doing actually a relatively solid job of taking care of the ball towards the beginning part of the season. Now they're down to about 247th in the country in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. The Citadel actually does have a pair of guys that give you double figures. That'd be Christian Moore with about 11 points per contest, shoots 38.5% for three. Braxton Williams, 36% three-point shooter, 13.5 points per game. So this team has ascended into the top 320 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and both these guys shoot over 73% the free throw line, so you got a little bit of something going there. But man, this team is well outside the top 275 in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage, and you've got an East Tennessee team that you've got really good versatility with this team. And what I like about East Tennessee is that they've got a really nice facilitator that is very unselfish in Al Strothers. He only gives you 3.5 points per game, but leads the team with 3.3 assists per contest, does a rock solid job generating turnovers on defense, and that allows the likes of Cam Morris, Brian Taylor, both give you 14.5 points per contest to really shine. Both shoot 35% from three. Blake Barkley shooting 42% from three. He supplies about 14 points per game, and for the CTSU team, they are going to be looking to really knife the ball down low. They're outside the top 200 with regards to their 3-point shooting percentage, but in terms of being able to hit their 2-point shots, they've been one of the better interior offenses in all of college basketball in terms of that 2-point shooting percentage. Right now, they are checking in 37th in all of college basketball, and that actually goes up to 61.4% in their home games. That is a top 25 mark in all of college basketball. I do think that that's going to reign supreme here against a Citadel team that, to their credit, they were able to come back in that game against Furman a few days ago, but I think that ETSU just too well rounded, and I think that the Citadel going to have a very tough time being able to have good, clean possessions and doing their part with this total. Semi-total 138.5. I'm going to be in on this total under, and with East Tennessee, I'm willing to lay up to 18 points with them. 881, 882 on the card. Now we go to the games that we were supposed to get to start with. St. Louis is on the road against St. Bonaventure. The Bonnies are an 8.5 point home underdog. Total on this game, it is 158.5, and with St. Louis, I did set them as a 7-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take the points with St. Bonaventure. It is a very difficult place to travel to in Olean, New York, and for Bonaventure, it has been a little bit of a fall off with their interior play. They're just 211th in the country with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage. They do have Daryl Simmons, who's been able to do a nice job, give you 14 points per contest, shoots at nearly 40% from three, and St. Bonaventure is overall 28th in the country with their 3-point shooting percentage at 37.3%, and you got a St. Louis team that is very well rounded. They're a top 15 team in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis. They shoot 39% from three, but the offense has not been quite the same away from home. They shoot 41.4% from 3-point range at home. That goes down to about 33.1% away from home, and they do fall outside the top 110 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis away from home. The defense really doesn't suffer, though. Overall, St. Louis is 9th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. That's still 11th away from home. So I do think that this is going to be a little bit of a lower scoring game, even though you got a St. Louis team that's looking to bump up their tempo. 43rd in terms of total possessions per game. St. Bonaventure, they're still a relatively slow and controlled team. They're hovering right around about 248th in terms of total possessions per game. And for St. Louis, even though they've got Robbie Avila, it's just really a collective that's doing it for this team. Even if you include Avila, you've got 8 different guys between 8.1 and 12.8 points per contest. Pretty much all but 2 of these guys give you at least 4 rebounds per game. Just a really nice collective in general. Avila is right now shooting 45% for 3. Trey Green shoots 45% for 3. Quentin Jones, 34.5% from the outside. And this has been a St. Louis team that hasn't really generated a lot of turnovers, but they've been a top 25 team in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. They're doing a nice job in terms of controlling the boards as well. They've been a top 100 team with that regard, but I do think that Bonaventure is going to be able to hold lively here because they do have a double-double machine of their own. They've gotten great production out of Frank Mitchell, supplying 17.5 points, 10.5 boards per contest. Caden Charles has come on strong with about 6.5 boards, 12.5 points per game. With this bunch, you've also got Daniel Egbaniwe, who was a primary rebounder out there in the Ohio Valley last season, and now he's giving you about 9.5 points. He's been able to shoot about 42% from three-point. Has dealt with a little bit of ailment, but should be good to go here. I think that Bonaventure is going to hold in there, and again, that's going to be a little bit lower scoring, as St. Louis hasn't been quite the same offense away from home. I did set my line here at 7, so I'm willing to take the 8 to 8.5 here with St. Bonaventure, and I'm in on the under. Set by total 154, 883, 884. You've got Indiana on the road against Rutgers. Rutgers is a pretty sizable home underdog here. You're getting with them 7.5 points. 146.5 to 148 is the total line. Made my total 140.5. I'm in on the under. Rutgers still a very slow and controlled team. 264th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. And not going to say that Indiana's monsters of the midway with regards to their defense, but they're solid. They're 59th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. 58th in opponent's three-point shooting percentage. Not a team that's necessarily pushing the issue with regards to generating turnovers. And neither team is doing an amazing job on the glass. Indiana's outside the top 225 in terms of offensive rebound percentage. Rutgers is a top 100 team, but they're not cashing in on those opportunities. They're outside the top 330 in terms of their two-point shooting percentage, and for Rutgers, it's really been left to two men to really be able to just gear the offense in the right direction, as you've had Tariq Francis come in, give you about 15.5 points per contest, shoots 32.5% per three with 2.5 assists, steal per contest. Dylan Grant, 11.5 points. He shoots 35.5% from three, and to the credit, Darren Buchanan, I've always liked him coming over from George Washington. 8 points, shoots 47.5% from three, but it is a Rutgers team that as a whole, they just have not been able to execute very well. They're outside the top 150 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and for this Rutgers team, typically they're built around good, rock-solid defense, and they've been a top 150 team in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage. They're outside the top 300 in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, but it is an Indiana team that they themselves in a roadside-to-score venue only shoot about 32.5% from three. You have to love what Lamar Wilkerson brings to the table. Top scorer with 19 points, shoots 40% from three. Tucker DeVries, do-it-all sort of player, 14 points, 4.5 boards, 3 assists per contest, and Tatum Connerway has actually become a really nice facilitator. He and Connor Enright both give between 4.2 and 4.3 assists per game. Indiana, top 100 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. They shoot 78% of the free throw line. That's a top 15 mark in the country. Top 40 team with regards to their two-point shooting percentage. So they're doing all the little things well, and I do think that that's going to be able to add up just enough to be able to get it done. And this has been a good team with regards to their shooting percentages. Top 80 team in terms of opponents' two-point and three-point shooting percentage. Indiana, not a super slow team, not a super fast team, 218th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Did as a result set my total at a 140.5. I'm in on the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay this number here with Indiana. Willing to lay up to 8 with them. 885, 886. UMass is on the road. They're facing off against Buffalo, and let's go Buffalo as a home underdog of 1.5 to 2.5 points. 158.5 to 159.5 is the total, and with this Buffalo bunch, I did set them as a 5-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take them out right on the money line. It is a UMass team that is going to have a nice advantage on the glass. They're actually 10th in the country in terms of defensive rebound percentage, and this is going to be a classic strength-on-strength duo here, as you've got a Buffalo team that has been really good with their three-point shooting. 20th in the country. They shoot 38.2% from three-points. UMass, 12th in the country in opponents' three-point shooting percentage away from home at 28.3%, but Buffalo is going to get more clean possessions. UMass is having a little bit of a tough time taking care of the ball, 273rd in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. Buffalo is 85th, and Buffalo a top 125 team in terms of generating turnovers as well, and UMass just cannot be trusted in a tight spot at the free throw line. They're about 317th in the country in terms of their free throw shooting percentage. Now, you have to like what Daniel Hankins-Sanford brings to the table down low, 11.5 points, 7 rebounds per game, and then you got two other guys that give you at least 6 rebounds per game. Jaden Adunji, about 6.2 points, 6.3 boards, and then Leonardo Batil, he's your main scorer, 17.7 rebounds per game. It's a UMass team that's going to be very much looking to pile drive the ball down low. Top 100 team in terms of percentage of their shots that come from inside the three-point line, but that said, this is a UMass team that also leave themselves vulnerable on the inside. They've also been outside the top 250 in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage. It is a Buffalo team that, while they do such a good job of being able to bomb it from three, they're also a top 130 team with their two-point shooting percentage. They have been dealing with a little bit of injury. Daniel Freitag, he's giving you about 20.5 points per contest. I believe that he was out of the fold in that loss that they took on Tuesday, and that is something that I had to note in this game. But that said, you still have the likes of Ryan Sable, Angelo Breezy, who have been able to do a nice breezy job of giving you about 30 points per contest. Both shoot at least 38.5% from three. Noah Batchelor, good versatility, 5 boards, 7 points. He shoots about 40% from three. And though Buffalo is not going to give themselves a lot of second and third chances outside the top 225 in terms of offensive rebound percentage, they haven't been getting completely blasted on the glass themselves. They're a team that does rank in the top 150 in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Now, they are giving it up from inside the three-point line. They have been outside the top 300 in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage. UMass, though, they're outside the top 175 in terms of their own two-point shooting percentage. I do think that in the end, Buffalo gets the job done. I do think that it's going to be an interesting tempo war as well. You've got a Buffalo team that's about 257th in terms of total possessions per game. UMass 28th in the country. I think that you get some late game fouls and some good execution from the Buffalo offense. I did set my total at a 159, so between 158.5 to 159.5. Personally, I lean 159.5 to the under, as I do think that this is going to be a slow down game, and Daniel Freitag dealing with an injury has to figure into that, but I'm going to be taking Buffalo on the money line to go along with the 159.5 or higher to the under, 887, 888. Marquette is on the road against Butler. Butler is a 6.5 to a 7.5 point favorite total on this game. It is 160.5, and with Butler, I did set them here as a favorite of 8.5 points. So I'm going to be willing to lay the number. You've got a Butler team that has been solid with regards to their overall offense. They're a top 100 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, about 98th in two-point shooting percentage, 157th in terms of three-point shooting percentage. The one thing that they do a really good job of is grabbing second chances. 40th in the country in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. And for Marquette, they've actually been surprisingly okay in giving themselves some second chances. Top 175 team here, but Marquette in a road/score venue, they are 303rd in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. They're not executing inside. They're not executing on the outside. You do have Ben Gold, who's been that main rebounder for the team. He's been supplying the team with about 8.6 rebounds per game, but they lose Zay Lowry, who decided to leave the team. You have not been able to get much outside of Nigel James and Chase Ross, as Ross has been sort of that do-it-all sort of guy, 15.5 points, 2.5 steals, 3.5 assists per contest, and James is like the lone guy that shoots well from three. As a matter of fact, out of their top five scorers, only guy that shoots above 32.1% from three. He shoots 41% from three, 15 points, 4.5 assists, so he's been solid. And for Marquette, their forte is generating turnovers. Top 75 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Butler's been able to do a relatively solid job in terms of taking care of the ball, though, and for Butler, you've been able to get good production out of the man from Pepperdine and Gonzaga in Michael Ajay. 16 points, 11.5 rebounds per game. He's going to be able to win that battle down low. Finley Bizjack is Bizjacking teams who's shooting 35% from three, 17 points per contest. It's a Butler team that has been a relatively solid three-point shooting defense, top 125 team with that regard. They're a little bit vulnerable on the inside, but Marquette, they really don't have a lot of interior play with this Marquette team. They should be able to take advantage of the fact that Butler is well outside the top 175 in terms of defensive rebound percentage, but for Marquette, they're just offloading good, clean offense themselves. I think that this is going to be a sloppy game, even though you got two teams that play quite up tempo. Right now for Marquette, in terms of total possessions, Brain 57th in the country. Butler is more around about 45th to 46th, but I don't think that Marquette does their part with this total, so I set my line at 8.5. I'm willing to lay up to 8 here with Butler, and I'm in on the under. I set my total at a 154.5, 889, 890. It's Akron. They're going to be on the road against Ohio, and Ohio finds themselves as a 8.5 to a 9.5 point home underdog. 168.5 to 169.5 is the total, and I said Akron as an 8.5 point favorite. So at 9+, that does become my buy point on Ohio. It is an Ohio group that is going to have a little bit of tough time on the glass. They're not giving themselves second and third chances. 242nd in the country in terms of offensive rebound percentage, and more concerning, the team just is not burying threes right now. For Ohio, 338th in the country in terms of their three-point shooting percentage. Now, in conference play, it's been looking a little bit better. Last 3 games, they've been shooting more in the mid-30s from three-point range, and you do have Jackson Pavletsky, who I like. He comes over from Kimberly, Wisconsin, 17.5 points, 4.5 assists. He shoots 36.5% from three-point range, and you've been able to get a little bit of rebounding out of Javon Simmons along with Aiden Hadaway, combined 12.5 rebounds per game between the two of them. You get about 28 points per contest, and for Ohio, they're an okay team in terms of generating turnovers, top 145 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but they're back outside the top 270 in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, and that's going to be an issue here, as you do have an Akron team that they just absolutely light you up from three-point range. It's an Akron group that, as a collective from three-point range right now, they are 6th in the country at 39.9%. That only falls off to 38.9% in a road/neutral venue. You've got Tafari Johnson, who's been the top scorer with about 20 points, shoots 90% free throw line, 39% from three. And for this Akron team, each of your top 6 scorers all shoot at least 36.5% from three-point range. Marnie Lyles is able to give you about 15.5 points, 7.5 rebounds per game. Shamal Scott, 13.5 points. He shoots 43% from three-point range, but It is an Akron team, for as great as they are on offense. They're a top 20 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. They do leave a little bit of something to be desired on defense. They're outside the top 175 in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, and it has been an Akron team that they themselves have actually been relatively solid in terms of generating turnovers. So I do think that you have a little bit of a sneakiness for turnovers in this game. Akron is about 84th in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but if you look at that specifically in a roadside shoot-to-score venue, that does ascend into the top 45 in all of college basketball. Ohio, in their home games, they've been a top 140 team with this regard. So I did set a total here of a 166.5. I do like the under, and I do think that Ohio, with the way that their three-point shooting has been able to ascend a little bit, and thinking that they're going to be able to do just enough to hold in there on their home floor, I do think that they are going to be able to hang within this number just barely. I set my line at 8.5, so 9+1, take the points with Ohio, and I'm going to be in on this total under as well. 891, 892 on the card. It is Ohio State. They're on the road against Michigan, the Ohio State University. A underdog here of 15 to 15.5 points. 162.5 to 163 is the total. I did set my line at a 15.5. I'm willing to lay up to 15 and not half a point more with Michigan. It is a Michigan team that really has things rocking and rolling once again. I recognize that they have not covered in each other last, I believe now 5 games, but in the win against Washington, the win that they had against Indiana, it shows that they are back in full force. One thing that Michigan is really not doing a great job of is the turnover battle. They're a country average team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis and taking care of the ball themselves, but this is a Michigan team that they have just been so efficient with regards to both their offense and their defense. It's a Michigan team that is a top 80 team with regards to their three-point shooting percentage, but the real, shall we say, forte of this team is down low. It's a big reason why this Michigan team in terms of points per possession is number 10 in all of college basketball. You've got Yaxel Lendeborg, Ade Mara, Morris Johnson, all give you at least 6.5 rebounds per game. Lendeborg, he's got the versatility to shoot in the mid/high 30s from three-point range, and you've been able to get really good production out of all he can do in the backcourt. 10.5 points. He shoots 41% from three. And Morris Johnson doesn't take a lot of threes, but when he does shoot 40% from three-point range. And for Michigan, this continues to be a top 5 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Just so much great shot blocking as Morris Johnson, Yaxel Lendeborg, and Ade Mara. Between the three of them, you're able to get right around about 5.5 blocks per contest. So they've been able to do a magnificent job there. They are a top 5 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, shot 55 team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. And where Ohio State likes to feast is with being able to excel down low. They've been a top 15 team in terms of their own 2-point shooting percentage. And to their credit, Ohio State has been a top 50 team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. They guard the arc well. Bruce Thornton and Long John Mobley are the big reason why. Combined 36 points per contest. Both shoot identical 41.4% clips from three. And you can get Ohio State to the free throw line. They hit their free throws. Each of their top 4 scorers shoot at least 77% of the free throw line. Mobley and Thornton both shoot above 85.5% at the charity stripe. As a collective, they're a top 10 team with that regard. And for Ohio State, they're a team that they do a nice job taking care of the ball. Top 100 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. They're outside the top 290 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. So you should see some nice clean possessions here. Big reason why I did set my total at a 163.5, especially with Michigan really bumping up their tempo in terms of total possessions per game. They're 12th in the country. Ohio State is fast, but not warp speed fast. We're in 3rd in terms of total possessions per game. So seeing this total at a 162.5, 163, I'm in on the over, but I think that this Michigan team going to overwhelm an Ohio State team that is outside the top 125 in terms of offensive rebound percentage. I think that Michigan wins this game from within, so I'm going to lay up to 15 here with Michigan, and I'm going to be in on the over. 893, 894 on the card. You've got Utah State. They're going to be on the road against Colorado State. Colorado State home underdogs of 3.5 to 4 points. It's on this game. It is 148.5 to 149.5. I do like the under. I did set my total 146.5. Now, the last time these two teams played, Utah State won that game, and I'm not even kidding here, by a count of 100 to 58. I think that we're going to be a little bit more competitive here, especially because I just don't know if you get that many points in this game. Set my total 146.5. I like the under. Now, for Colorado State, 23rd in the country in terms of points per possession. They are number 2 in the country with their 3-point shooting percentage. That said, you've got a team that, as well, when they get shut down from 3-point range, they just don't have as much range now. They are a top 55 team with their 2-point shooting percentage, and they do shoot 77% at the free throw line as a collective, but they're also outside the top 250 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and it's a Colorado State team that could be a little bit sloppy with the ball. I'm not saying that they're just absolutely atrocious with it, but now you face off against a Utah State team that is number 4 in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and Colorado State about 253rd in the country in terms of turnovers per possession on offense, so they do Trade in turnovers for good looks from three-point. Utah State, cleaner with the ball. They're about 128th in the country. And for Colorado State, you just have a stacked lineup of guys who are able to pop in and lock it from three. Each of your top four scorers shoot at least 43% from three-point. Josh Passarelli, Kyle Jorgensen, Brandon Rechsteiner, and Kerry Booth. And the last time these two teams played, Kyle Jorgensen was a little bit banged up. He's just returned for the team, so that's going to elevate this Colorado State team a little bit. And then you've got Jevin Muniz, a little bit of a 6'6" point forward, 9 points, 4.5 boards, 4.5 assists. Love what he's able to bring to the table. But then on the flip side for Utah State, they've got the best player in this game. That would be MJ Collins, who's been supplying 19.5 points per contest. He shoots over 42% from 3 points. Mason Foslov, 38% 3-point shooter, 17 points, 6 boards, 2.5 steals per contest. And then for this Utah State team, they should be able to run things down low, as Utah State has also been a top 100 team with regards to their overall rebound percentage. They're doing a nice job being able to grab second and third chances, being a top 75 team. When you do have someone like a Gary Clark, who's able to give you 8 points, 5.5 rebounds per game, along with this team, just being able to generate those turnovers in general. They're 18th in the country. Turns points allowed on a per possession basis away from home. And this is going to be a low-tempo game. Colorado State, out of 365 Division I teams, 364th in terms of total possessions per game. I think that Utah State dictates the terms and gets the job done. Set my line at 6.5. I'm going to be willing to lay with Utah State, and I'm in on the under. Set my total at a 146.5. 895, 896 on the card. It is Furman, and they are going to be on the road against UNC Greensboro. And Greensboro, home underdogs with 4.5 to 5.5 points, 150.5 is the total. Set my line at 5. Right now, we are between a 4.5 to a 5.5. Personally, I would rather lay the 4.5 rather than take the 5.5. I'm just out on this UNC Greensboro team. For Greensboro, they become a little bit more of a mid-tempo team this year, and I don't think that's necessarily been for their own good. With UNC Greensboro, they're doing an okay job taking care of the ball, especially at home. At home, they're a top 75 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, and the offense isn't terrible, 181st in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Furman is more around 155th, and this despite the fact that Furman just has not really shot it well from 3 points. You're 274th in the country in terms of 3-point shooting percentage. That goes down to 29.1% away from home, but Furman always good on the inside, 20th in the country with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage overall. But if you look at them in a road or neutral court venue, they are number 2 in the country with regards to that 2-point shooting percentage, and they should be able to find better looks from 3-point range against a UNC Greensboro team that I wish I could put it any other way, but they simply are not guarding the arc this year for UNC Greensboro in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, 340th in all of college basketball. Now, they do have Justin Neely. He's been able to give you over 15 points per contest, or is in there 10.5 to 11 rebounds per game. You do have I'm not even kidding here, 54% 3-point shooter in Lillian Mayville, who's been able to give you 10 points per game. KJ Younger, Donald White, a junior, they combine for about 26 points per contest, so these guys have been able to do a solid job there, but it is a little bit of a top-heavy team that has been trying to mix and match. They're not necessarily the strongest team on the glass or outside the top 150 with that regard, and on the flip side for Furman, they should be able to do a nice job down low. Now, they have been dealing with a little bit of ailment here, as you've been seeing the fold for quite a while. Cooper Bowser was give you 13.6 rebounds per game, but Charles Johnson, one of their main holdovers from these seasons ago, only shoots 28% from 3, but at about 6'11", 10.5 points, 9.5 boards, gives you a steal per contest, so good versatility. You've had Asa Thomas be able to supply 13 points. He gives you about 4.5 rebounds per game. Now, he's been dealing with a little bit of ailment as well, probably going to be out once again, but even without him, this team has still been able to do a solid job on offense. They are coming off of blowing a 19-point lead to the Citadel. That was not great. Alex Wilkins, he's giving you about 17.5 points per contest, so, and I do think that this is going to be a team that piles drives the ball inside. It's a Furman team that, with regards to percentages, are a top 175 team in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. Not a team that's going to dictate the issue. They're outside the top 300 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and in a tight spot, they do shoot 65% at the free throw line. That is less than savory, to say the least, and Greensboro, not much better, 68.9% at the free throw line. So I did set a total here of a 149, especially with neither of these teams like playing at a harebrained pace. Furman 234th in terms of total possessions per game, but I do think that Furman, after that big giant letdown against the Citadel, they bounce back here. I'm going to lay up to 4.5 with them, and I'm in on the under. Semi total 149. This is the last game on a normal Las Vegas betting board before we hit the extra games. 897, 898, Louisiana Monroe on the road against Appalachian St. Appalachian St, double-figure favorites here of 15.5 points, 145 is the total, and made a total of a 143.5. I do like the under. I did make my total a little bit lower because Louisiana Monroe, who is really cranking up the tempo going into the day on Thursday, 71st in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and they gave up 115 points to Marshall. I think that they're going to be slowed down in this game because they're playing the second game of a back-to-back, both of which were day games, so that's not great. Appalachian State, meanwhile, one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball. 354th in terms of total possessions per game. And for Appalachian State, at the very least, they make the most out of their possessions with not turning it over, and they don't turn you over. They are well outside the top 3 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis on defense, but they're doing a solid job making the most out of their opportunities on offense. Top 125 team in terms of taking care of the ball for Appalachian State. They've been an okay offensive team down low, about 152nd in the country in terms of their 2-point shooting percentage, and Louisiana Monroe is actually going to have a little bit of an edge with regards to their 3-point shooting. For Louisiana Monroe, entered into yesterday shooting about 35.8% per 3. That's the top 75 mark in all of college basketball. Appalachian State, they shoot about 33.1% at home, but overall 31.6%. That's 277th in all of college basketball. But again, the back-to-back factor is huge here for Louisiana Monroe, a Monroe team that is not going to give themselves any sort of second and third chances. They are outside the top 340 in terms of their offensive rebound percentage. Now, you do have two guys I really like, and Martavius Russell comes over from Mississippi State, 15.5 points, 3.5 boards, shoots 37% per 3, and Kristen Lewis, going into the game yesterday, he had scored at least 14 points in, I believe, 10 out of the last 13 games, 16.5 points, 3 assists, steal and per contest. He's come on strong, but you don't have a lot outside of that. Lavelle Brano has been supplying the team with about 14 points per contest, but he's been dealing with a little bit of injury. He's been in and out of the lineup, and in a back-to-back spot, if he's able to go here, he's probably not going to be 100%. Dylan Diaz has been a guy that's been able to give you about 6.5 points per contest. He's another guy that's been dealing with a little bit of injury as well, and Appalachian State does have a Luke Wilson. No, not the guy that was playing any sort of a role in terms of old school or anything like that, but he's been able to give this team about 7 rebounds per game. Should be able to win that battle down low. Kassan Jennings, Alonzo Dowd, the Dodfather, they combine for about 27 points per contest. They combine to shoot about 36% from 3, and Appalachian State awful at the free throw line. Going into yesterday, 61.1%, that is dead last in all of college basketball, but they're also doing a great job in terms of both their interior and their exterior defense in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. They rank in the top 150 in both, but in terms of the 2-point shooting percentage, especially 51st in the country, with Monroe having to play back-to-back day games, I think that that's really going to take it out of them. A very much jump shooting team, and I think that Appalachian State blows them away. Set my line at 16.5, one away up to 16 here with App State, and I'm in on the under. Set my total at 143.5. And then this is a late insert. We saw this added to the board very late on Thursday, so hopefully I didn't forget any games, but that said, this should be $899, $900 on the card. The rotation number might change, but this is going to be Southern Indiana, and they're playing host to Western Illinois. Currently, the books do not have a number on this game, but I've got my handicap. Set Southern Indiana as a 5.5 point favorite, 1 to lay up to 5 with them, 6 or more. Take the points with Western Illinois, 135 or less. I'm in on the over, 136 or higher, the under. Now, you've got a Western Illinois team that's one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball, 282nd in terms of total possessions per game. You've got a Southern Indiana team that honestly is not pushing the world's worst pace, 104th in terms of total possessions per game, and they're coming off of an overtime game as well, where they scored 51 points in an overtime game, so that shows you just how bad of a shooting team this is. For Southern Indiana right now, they entered into the day on Thursday, 330th, with regards to their 3-point shooting percentage, outside the top 3, with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage. Western Illinois, a little bit of a better 2-point shooting team. They're 355th in the country in terms of their 3-point shooting percentage, but it's not like this Western Illinois team is playing any sort of great defense. Western Illinois is doing an okay job of grabbing some offensive rebounds, top 200 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage, and that's one thing that Southern Indiana really does not. But for Southern Indiana, I'm just a little bit more of a believer in this backcourt, as Western Illinois does have Isaiah Griffin. He comes over from Idaho State, and he's been able to do a solid job for the team. Right now, supplying you with about 12.5 points, 4 boards, and from 3-point, he shoots 38.5% from 3. He's pretty much the lone guy on the roster that shoots above 30% from 3. Lucas Lorenzen supplies 15 points, 4 boards per contest, and then you do have one dominant rebounder in Uric Dixon. He's been able to give you 8.5 points, 7.5 rebounds per game, but outside Dixon, nobody else gives you more than 4.2 rebounds per game, and it's a Western Illinois team that is really getting blitzed from the outside. They're hovering right around about 300th in the country in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. Southern Indiana has been a much better defense. They make you drive the ball inside. They're a top 40 team in terms of percentage of opponent shots that come from inside the 3-point line, top 140 team with regards to that 2-point shooting percentage at Ismail El Habib and Cardell Bailey. They entered into yesterday a combined 31 points per contest. Combined shoot about 32.5% from 3 now. This team is awful at the free throw line. They are shooting as collective 63.6% at the free throw line, bottom 10 mark in all of college basketball. And each of your top 3 scorers, Bailey, Habib, and Amari Brown, who's been dealing with injury. All these guys, they are currently shooting less than 70% at the free throw line, and Brown has been dealing with an injury all season long, so having him back, that helps out. Tolu Samuel, so he's able to give you about 8 rebounds per game. Alaya Obaji has been able to give you about 5.5 points, 5 rebounds per game as well, so I do think that Southern Indiana. Even though they don't pull in there a lot of second and third chances on the offensive glass, they're still going to be able to do a solid job down low. I think that you're going to get quite a few possessions in this game because Southern Indiana looks to push tempo, but look at them in conference play right now. They are averaging fewer than 65 points per contest, so I do think that this is going to be a little bit of a gross game, but Western Illinois, hard to have any faith in them at all as well. So I'm going to be willing to lay up to 5 here with Southern Indiana, 6 or more. Take the points with Western Illinois, 135 or less in on the over, 136 or higher the under, and now we should be able to hit the extra games.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
306-591, 306-592. It is Mercyhurst, and they are going to be on the road against New Haven, and New Haven finds themselves as a pick'em, and your total on this game is 122.5, and I think that Mercyhurst should be the favorite here. I set them as a 7.5 point favorite. For New Haven, they have not been able to put points up on the board all season long, mainly because 365 Division I teams, they are 365th in terms of total possessions per game, but on top of that, they are 351st in terms of points per possession, not taking care of the ball, 354th in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, and not to say that Mercyhurst has been like number one in the country in terms of generating turnovers or anything like that, but this is a solid team on defense. Mercyhurst, a top 135 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're a top 125 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. They are 51st in the country, and New Haven, they're okay in terms of generating turnovers. They're 121st in the country in their home games. That's more around about 150th or so, and for New Haven, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, about 214th, but in games played at home, that's outside the top 235, and I think the Mercyhurst should be able to find a way to be able to get the job done here. It's not a great 3-point shooting team. They're only shooting as collective about 32% from the outside, but Bernie Blunt along Jake Lolleman combined for 19 points per contest between the two of them. They shoot about 37% for 3, give you about 5 assists per game, and then Kadir Martin is able to give you 2.5 blocks, 9 points, 6.5 rebounds per game, and that's going to be big in this spot, especially with a guy that stands 6'8" in Michaelis Ivanauskis, who's able to give you 8.5 points, 5.5 rebounds per game, because with teams coming up from the non-D1 level, typically the biggest thing that they struggle with is size, and right now you've got Andre Pasha, Alon Stefano, Falapa, who have been able to combine for about 10 rebounds between the two of them, about 17.5 points per game. They're like the lone two guys that see meaningful minutes that are above 6'7" though, so that's an issue. You've got Jabari Fitzpatrick, who's been able to give you about 11.5 points per contest, but he shoots 24% from 3-point range. You have Pasha and Falapa actually combined to shoot about 37% from 3. They've been by far your best 2 3-point shooters on this team, but I think that you get a little bit of a slog of a game, but I do think that Mercyhurst is going to be able to really find a way to be able to get through this defense. They're going to be able to find some good looks down low, and it is a New Haven team that's been outside the top 250 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, so did set a total year of a 123.5, even though Mercyhurst outside the top 330 themselves in terms of total possessions frame. Do you like this 122.5 to the over end? Mercyhurst, I feel like, should be a 7.5 point favorite. Taking them on this pick'em line. 306-593, 306-594. It's Chicago State on the road against St. Francis, Pennsylvania. St. Francis is a 3-point favorite total on this game. It is 146, and I did set this line at a 1.5. I'm actually going to be willing to take the points with Chicago State. For St. Francis, they do one thing relatively okay. They're a top 175 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, but ghastly on defense overall. 355th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Not that Chicago State is great. They're about 334th, but Chicago State is also a good team in terms of generating turnovers. How about 64th in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis? This against a St. Francis team that they really don't have a lot of offense. Now, for St. Francis, they've actually ascended down to 75th in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, so I do think that there's going to be a lot of sloppiness there, but St. Francis is right now 345th in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Chicago State is 354th. Neither of these teams really get a lot of rebounding. That best rebounder is going to be belonging to St. Francis in this game, as you've had Skywicks do a really good job with his versatility. 17.5 points, 7 boards, 2.5 assists, shoots 34% from 3, and then you've got Zion Russell, who's able to give you 11.5 points, comes over from Niagara, and this team has each other top 4 scorers give you at least 1.3 steals per contest, so that helps out very much so, but outside of Wicks, you've only got one other guy in Gesson Liberius, who gives you over 4 rebounds per game, so that's going to be a little bit of a problem. Now, for Chicago State, you don't have a single guy on the roster that gives you over 5 rebounds per game, and that is an issue, but for Chicago State, this is a group that in conference play, they've been able to shoot about 36% from 3-point, so they're a little bit more lethal there. They were dealing with injuries to guys like Braylon Bush, Doyle Cockrell. These are 2 of your top 3 scorers between the 2 of them. They give you about 22.5 to 23 points per contest, and Cockrell does shoot 42% from three. Marcus Sankersley has been the consistent force on offense. 13.5 points, really doesn't pop it well from three, but gives you 3.5 boards, pair of assists per contest. And with the Chicago State team, where they really get gashes down low, out of 365 Division I teams, 365th in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. St. Francis outside the top 330 with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage, offense and defense. I think that keeps Chicago State lively in a game where you should be able to get quite a few possessions here. Chicago State, they're a country average team, 197th in terms of total possessions range. St. Francis has looked to push tempo a little bit more, 124th. So I did set my total here out of 147. I think that you're close enough for late game falling. So in on the over and we'll take the points with Chicago State. 36-595, 36-596. Wagner is on the road against Lemoyne. Lemoyne is a favorite of 7.5 points total on this game, 149 to 149.5. And with Lemoyne, I set them as an 8-point favorite. So 7.5 is my absolute max lay, but I'm going to be willing to lay with Lemoyne. Not a fast team, not a slow team. 209th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. And for Wagner, 291st in terms of total possessions per game is actually fast. Like, Wagner is typically well outside the top three with that regard, and they have been slowing down here in NEC play. But Donald Copeland, the main coach, he's been placed on leave, so they've been going through a little bit of mixing and matching. And for Wagner, they've actually been a team that's not been the world's worst on offense. They're up to 206th in the country in terms of points per possession, top 180 team when they're away from home because they shoot it well from three. They're shooting 39.4% from three. That goes up to 40.2% in a roadside-shoot-score venue. And this Lemoyne team is outside the top 320 in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. But for Lemoyne, they themselves shoot 35% from three. That goes up to about 36.5% in their home games. And I do think that there's going to be some second and third chances to be had here because you got a Lemoyne team that is allowing teams to grab about 31.5% of their misses as an offensive rebound in their home games. Wagner, they are allowing teams to grab 32.5% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound in games played away from home. So I did set a total here of a 148 because I do think that Wagner is going to continue to slow down. So I'm going to be in on that under, but I do think that the sloppiness as well is something that you want to be noting because even though Wagner does a great job in terms of popping in from three-point range, this is a Wagner bunch that is right now 275th in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. Lemoyne is 311th, but Lemoyne does protect the ball a little bit better at home. And for Lemoyne, they should have the best rebounder in this game. That'd be Shiloh Jackson. Comes on over from Texas A&M Corpus Christi. He's been supplying the team with about 14.5 points, 8.5 rebounds per game. And then Trent Mascara shoots 38.5% from three. He gives you 14 points per game. Ja'Kai Sanders, not necessarily a great three-point shooter, but 4 assists, 10 points. So he's been running some good, clean offense. And this is a Lemoyne team that has been really good with their interior defense. They've been a top 75 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. This is a Wagner group that while they shoot it really well from three-point range, they're still a top 100 team in terms of percentage of their shots that come from inside the three-point arc. And for Wagner, top 125 team in terms of their own 2-point shooting percentage defense. Nick Jones has been your lone double-figure scorer, 15 points, steal and a half, 2.5 assists per contest. And then you've had Benil Basil, who's been able to shoot 44% from three, 8.5 points per game. It's just really a good collective here for this Wagner team. You've got essentially 7 different guys that are currently healthy that are giving you at least 6 points per contest, with Jones the only guy that gives you over 10 points per contest. But that said, with this Wagner team, they are a team that if they find themselves in a pressure spot, they only shoot about 71% at the free throw line. They've had a rough go of it with regards to the defensive glass, and with them having just an inability to generate turnovers outside the top 275 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, I think that Lemoyne finds good looks, gets the job done at home. I'm willing to lay up to 7.5 here with Lemoyne, and with regards to total, set mine at a 148. So at the 149, I'm in on the under. 306-597, 306-598. Long Island is going to be on the road against Stonehill. Stonehill is a home underdog of 7 points on this game. It is 137. And with Stonehill, I did set them here as a underdog of 8.5 points. So I'm going to be willing to lay with Long Island. Long Island's big kryptonite has been the fact that they have been oh so sloppy with the ball. In terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, about 340th in the country. Stonehill, third worst team in the country. In terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, you've got a Long Island team that has been slowing down a little bit more recently, but still about 153rd in terms of total possessions per game. Stonehill is about 230th, and both of these teams are relatively solid with their three-point shooting percentages. Long Island especially. Long Island is a top 60 team with regards to their own three-point shooting percentage. Meanwhile, you've got Stonehill hovering right around about 180th, but for Stonehill, they really give it up from three-point range at home. They allow opponents to shoot 36% from three in their home games. That is outside the top 285 in all of college basketball, and really things went downhill when Will Bachelor went down with an injury. Now Herman Coffey is able to give you 14 points per contest. I like what he's able to provide. Ramon Espano Guzman is able to give you about 7 or so rebounds per game, so they're not getting completely absolutely blasted on the glass. But this is the Long Island team that is a top 65 team in terms of their offensive rebound percentage, and they do a great job early by committee. You've got a quartet of guys, Shadrick Lassou, John Goings, Greg Gecko-Gordon, and Jamal Fuller, that all give you at least 4.3 rebounds per game. Fuller and Gordon, they combine for a little bit over 31 points per contest, and Fuller shooting 48.5% from three-point. Then you have Malachi Davis, who's the main facilitator, 4 assists, a little bit of a steal, 16 points per contest, and it's a Long Island team that, while they don't do a great job in terms of taking care of the ball, they have been a top 155 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and Stonehill has been well outside the top 275 in terms of their own ball security. Now, they do have a guy in Devontae Hackett who's been solid in terms of hacking it with about 11.5 points, 4 boards per contest. He shoots about 34% from 3, while Coffey shoots 42% from 3, and if they could get back Will Batchelor, that'd be great, but I think that he's done for the year, and Ridvan Tudvik down low has been able to give 7.5 points, 8 boards per contest, so I do think that Stonehill going to give themselves some second and third chances, but Stonehill's been one of the luckiest teams in all of college basketball. Opponents have shot 64% at the free throw line against them. That's the number 1 mark in all of college basketball, so that means that a little bit of negative regression might be coming for them, and with this team being outside the top 3 with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage, outside the top 3 in terms of free throw attempts on a per possession basis, I do think that Long Island goes out there, gets the job done. Do think that's going to be a higher scoring game, so by total at a 144.5. I like the over, and with Long Island, I'm going to be willing to lay up to 8 with them. 306.599, 306.600. Fairleigh Dickinson is on the road against Central Connecticut. Central Connecticut, a 6.5 point favorite. Total on this game, it is 144, and with Fairleigh Dickinson, I set them as an underdog of 15 points. I'm going to be willing to lay it. This is a Fairleigh Dickinson team at 339th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, outside the top 325 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and now they face off against a Central Connecticut team that is 4th in the country in terms of their 3-point shooting percentage at home at 42.2%, while Fairleigh Dickinson, they're allowing opponents to shoot a nice hearty 38.2% from 3. That is well outside the top 325 in all of college basketball. Fairleigh Dickinson, typically a team that's built around their backcourt. This year they went a little bit bigger, bringing in the 7-footer and Cyril Martinoff, 8 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. Shaw Jackson, who was over at VMI for a time, 9 points, 8.5 boards. So these guys have been able to help this team out on the glass. As Fairleigh Dickinson, now finally a top 225 team in terms of rebound percentage. Problem is they're really not executing at all on offense or on defense, or outside the top 270 in terms of both their own 2-point shooting percentage and opponents' 2-point shooting percentage and opponents' 3-point shooting percentage and their own 3-point shooting percentage, with Eric Parnell, Joey Neesman leading the way. Both are your double-figure scores, combined 23 points per contest between the two of them. They shoot about 34.5% from 3, and Parnell does shoot about 94.5% at the free throw line, but for Central Connecticut, the main kryptonite of this team has been their 3-point shooting defense and not generating turnovers. Are outside the top 3 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, outside the top 225 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, but they've been a top 125 team in terms of their opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and with the way that they just sizzle from 3, with Darren Smith Jr. giving you 20.5 points, shoots 38.5% from 3. Jay Rogers, 40% 3-point shooter, 11.5 points, 7.5 assists per game, and they just do a great job taking care of the ball. Central Connecticut, they're not necessarily a fast team, as in terms of total possessions per game, they do find themselves outside the top 250 in all of college basketball. As a matter of fact, they're 9th, but top 75 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. I do think that they're going to do a nice job as a collective, finding a way to be able to get it done here, and they keep you off the free throw line. They're a top 15 team in terms of fewest free throw attempts allowed on a per possession basis, and with that 3-point shooting and Fairleigh Dickinson not guarding the arc, I do think that even though it's going to be a slow down game, it is going to be an over. Semi-total 147, so I like the over, and made Central Connecticut the 15-point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to lay the number. And now these final 5 games were added to the board late, so we don't have any numbers, but I will give you my handicap. 306-601, 306-602. Lipscomb is going to be playing against the Florida Gulf Coast. I made Lipscomb a 6-point favorite, so want to lay up to 5.5 with them, 6.5 for more, taking the points with Dunk City, and then 153.5 for less in on the over, 154.5 for higher. The under. I had to knock down this total a little bit because these two teams played yesterday, and Florida Gulf Coast had to play a day game, so they're playing back-to-back day games. That's a little bit of a fade spot for them, and you've got a Florida Gulf Coast team that has been a good 3-point shooting percentage team. They entered into yesterday shooting about 36% as a collective from 3-point range away from home. That's a top 50 mark in all of college basketball. And for Dunk City, you've gotten some good backcourt play. J.R. Kaczynski, 15.5 points, 6.5 boards per contest. Isaiah Malone has done a nice job throwing in there 9 points, 5 boards. You've got a nearly 40% 3-point shooter in Ramir Barno, who's been able to give you 13 points per game. And the team isn't overly sloppy with the ball. They're about country average in terms of taking care of it. They do get blasted, though, on defense. They've been outside the top 225 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And now they go up against a Lipscomb team that has been a top 100 team in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on defense. For Lipscomb, it's been a wobbly defense, I think is the best way of being able to put it. And this is a team that can be had a little bit more on the inside. For Lipscomb, they do find themselves about 175th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but give it up about 14 points fewer per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home. And Lipscomb has good versatility. You've got Grant Hansman back from a season ago at 6'10", 14.5 points, 7 boards. He's shooting 37.5% from 3. Charlie Williams at 6'10", shoots about 36% from 3, 10.5 points out of him. And Mateo Esmeraldo, 7 assists to fewer than 2 turnovers per game. Lipscomb, one of the better teams in all of college basketball, taking care of the ball at home. Away from home, they've been turning the ball over a ton, but at home, they've been in their happy place. And it's a Lipscomb team that is a top 50 team in terms of percentage of their shots that come from 3-point range. And this has been a Florida Gulf Coast team that, quite frankly, just has not been able to do a great job in terms of guarding the 3-point line. Again, I do think that this game is going to be slowed down a little bit more with this being a back-to-back spot, but for Florida Gulf Coast, right now 271st in the country in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage that entered in the day on Thursday, being about 51st in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Lipscomb is 68th, but at home they're outside the top 125. So did set a total here to where 153.5 or less and on the over, 154.5 or higher the under. Lipscomb will more to lay up to 5.5 with them, 6.5 or more taking the points with Florida Gulf Coast. 3 of 6, 603, 3 of 6, 604. Stetson is going to be on the road against Austin Peay. Made Austin Peay the 17-point favorite, willing to lay up to 16.5 with them, 17.5 or more taking the points with Stetson, 148.5 or less, and on the over, 149 or higher the under. You got an Austin Peay team that entered into yesterday 77th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis and 28th in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Stetson, mid-tempo team, about 213th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. You've got an Austin Peay team that's starting to play a little bit more quickly, 128th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and typically where you're able to really exploit this Austin Peay team is down low. They are outside the top 225 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. You've been able to get good production out of Rashad Marshall, who comes over from Arkansas State. He's right now supplying the team with a little bit over 6 rebounds, 12.5 points per game, but this is a Stetson team that they just don't have much down low. Now, Stetson is starting to improve with their 3-point shooting. Going into yesterday in conference play, they were shooting from 3-point range more around about 37% from the outside, but this is an Austin Peay team that's a top 150 team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, and with a team playing a back-to-back like Stetson is, when you rely upon your legs for 3-point shooting like they do, that's not great. You do have Jamie Phillips and Ethan Copeland combining for 29 points per contest between the two of them. They shoot about 36% from 3, and Finley Sheridan, he's been able to shoot about 38.5% from 3, but only about 5 points per game. You've got a big 4 in Copeland, Phillips, and then Colin Cool, 10.5 points. He supplies about 5 rebounds per game. Jake Johnson, 8 points per contest. Nobody else gives you more than 5.3 points per game, and with this Austin Peay team, you've got 2 really nice go-to scorers, Colin Parker, Ivory Collins. They combine for about 30 points per contest. Parker's been able to shoot 42% from 3. Tate McCubbin at 6'8", shoots about 34% from the outside. And it's an Austin Peay team that, while they're a little bit vulnerable down low, this Stetson team being as much of a wreck as they are in terms of being able to win the battle on the glass. This is a Stetson team that's outside the top 275 with regards to rebound percentage. They're not grabbing any sort of second and third chances. They themselves are outside the top 340 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. I think that allows Austin Peay to dictate the tenor of this game. I'm willing to lay up to 16.5 here with Austin Peay, 17.5 or more, taking the points with Stetson, 148.5 or less, in on the over, 149.5 or higher, the under, 306, 605, 306, 606. Radford is playing us a high point. High point ups not be a low point, as I made high point the 13-point favorite. Willing to lay up to 12.5 with them, 13.5 or more, taking the points with Radford, set a total of 171. So 170 or less, in on the over, 171.5 or higher, the under. You've got a high point team that's really cranked up their tempo from past years. They're up to about 94th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Radford and your number one, or Zach Chu, man, they're going choo-choo to being 32nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but they are getting blitzed from 3-point range. Right now, Radford at home is the line team to shoot 39.6% from 3-point range. That is outside the top 340 in all of college basketball, and it's a high point team that their line teams only shoot about 32.5% from 3. That's the top 125 mark in all of college basketball, and High Point is generating a whole bunch of turnovers. 13th in the country in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Radford not bad themselves. 106th in the country with this regard. Goes up a little bit more at home, but this is a High Point team that they continue to be a top 20 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Dealing with the top scorer to Cameron Fletcher. He was averaging 16.5 points, 7.5 boards. That's a bit of a blow, but you still have out there Scary Terry Anderson and Rob Martin. They combine for about 28.5 points per contest. They combine to shoot between the two of them over 37% from 3. And then additionally, Scotty Washington is able to give you 8.5 points. He shoots in the mid-30s from 3-point. Chase Johnson, he does nothing but shoot threes, but he shoots 45% from 3-point range. It's a High Point team that's been able to be a top 125 team on the glass as well, and I just don't think that this Radford team is going to hold up with that. And additionally, for High Point, while they're a solid 3-point shooting team, they're also a top 20 team with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage. Radford, country average team with regards to 2-point shooting percentage defense. They themselves have been a top 125 team with their own 2-point shooting percentage. You've got 2 ACC guards. Del Jones comes over from Clemson, 16.5 points, shoots 34% from 3. Dennis Parker from NC State, he had that 50-plus point game against Coppin State earlier in the season, 19 points. He shoots 40% from 3. And Luka Walls has been able to shoot 46% from the outside, but This team I just fear is going to be very much rolled down low. Outside Dennis Parker, who gives you 6 rebounds per game. Only one other player gives you over 3.5 rebounds per game. Tyson Brown, 7 boards, a block per contest. He hasn't been too bad there, but that said, this is a Radford team that's just far worse on defense than this High Point team. And for Radford, they are outside the top 200 in terms of their own ball security. So I do think that High Point is going to be able to generate turnovers and really dominate this game. Willing to lay up to 12.5 here with High Point, 13.5 or more, taking the points with Radford, and then 170.5 or less than on the over, 171.5 or higher. The under 306, 607, 306, 608. USC Upstate is going to be on the road against Gardner Webb. I set USC Upstate here as a 14-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay up to 13.5 with them, 14.5 or more, taking the points with Gardner Webb, and I made a total of 154, so 153.5 or less in on the over, 154.5 or higher. The under, you've got an Upstate team that's not really going to put you under duress. They're only about 288th in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but Gardner Webb's even worse, and Gardner Webb, their metrics are right now a big giant sea of red. This is one of the worst defenses in all of college basketball. As a matter of fact, 365 Division I teams, 365th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They allowed over 90 points on their home floor this year to non-Division I North Greenville. Why they're pushing tempo, I have no idea. They're 74th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Upstate, we're around about 122nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. And I'm not going to say that Upstate is a bunch of wizards on defense, but they're 198th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Away from home, that ascends into the top 180. So they've been plenty respectable there for this Upstate team. You've got quite a few guys that just contribute to the guys. Kamari Gregory, Carmelo Adkins have been rock solid. Adkins, he gives you 12.5 points, 5 boards, shoots in the mid-30s from 3. Gregory, about 3 assists per contest. Tyler Smith throws in their 3 assists as a little bit more of a pass first guy. C.O.N.F. only about 5.5 points per contest, but it's an Upstate team that their country average with their 3-point shooting percentage. They don't do a great job down low. They're outside the top 250 with their own 2-point shooting percentage, but against this Gardner Webb team that has had more holes in it than Swiss cheese, they should be able to find some great looks. And for Gardner Webb, they're starting to get a little bit more scoring. They have a trio of guys, Jacob Hudson, Jacob Hogarth, and Spencer Sims, who they combine for about 31 points per contest. And Sims does shoot 44.5% from 3. Hogarth, very low volume, shoots 45% from 3. But Gardner Webb also outside the top 3 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. They're outside the top 330 in terms of their ball security, outside the top 300 in terms of their rebound percentage. It's just all sorts of bad for this team. They're outside the top 300 with their own 2-point shooting percentage. They are a bottom 5 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Their line teams to shoot over 36% from 3 if you include non-D1 teams. This is just a rough ordeal, and I do think that Upstate goes out there and just really pounds them. 13.5 or less, I'm willing to lay it with Upstate. 14.5 or more, willing to take the points with Gardner Webb. 153.5 or less, in on the over. 154.5 or higher. The under, we wrap things up with 306, 609, 306, 610. Longwood plays host to Charleston Southern. I set Charleston Southern as a 5-point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to lay up to 4.5 with them, 5.5 or more. I'm going to be willing to take those points with Longwood and then set a total to where a 152.5 or less. I'm in on the over. 153.5 or higher. The under. You got a Charleston Southern team that's been rock solid on defense. 144th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and they are really gunning it. 19th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Now, Charleston Southern is a bottom 5 team in the country in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. They're just not allowing you to be able to get good, clean looks, as they are 85th in the country in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. That goes to 30.9% in a roadside shoot score venue, so that's actually a top 55 mark when they leave home, and they don't allow a lot easy inside as well. They were dealing with some injuries with some of their low post pieces to begin the season. Now they've got them all back. They're about 20th in the country in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and for Charleston Southern, you got Bryson Blaine, who's been sort of a mix of a guy that sometimes comes in off the bench, sometimes as a starter, just has been a dynamo for this team. 17.5 points, shoots 36% from 3. Alan Sumler, he shoots 40% from 3, 17 points per contest. Now the team is coming off of a little bit of a less than savory loss against Presbyterian a few days ago where they gave it up in the second half, but this has been an offense that has been very rock solid all season long. Top 100 team with their 3-point shooting percentage and their 2-point shooting percentage, and it's a Charleston Southern team that they're going to give up a lot of second and third chances on the glass. Outside the top 225 in terms of defensive rebound percentage, they're hovering right around about 213th in terms of offensive rebound percentage, so not great, not terrible there. You've got a Longwood team that they've been really priding themselves on generating turnovers on defense, but it is a Longwood team that they're looking for as many second and third chances as possible. They're 49th in the country with regards to their offensive rebound percentage, and they need them because they do not shoot it well from 3-point. They're 27th in the country in terms of their 3-point shooting percentage at 30.3%. Meanwhile, for Charleston Southern, the 3-point shooting hasn't traveled the world's greatest, 40.5% at home, 32.3% in a roadside shoot score venue. But for Longwood, they have yet to really find that go-to scorer. Right now, your top scorer is Elijah Tucker. He's been able to give you about 12.5 points, 6 rebounds per contest, and then the George Washington transfer in Troy Hutchinson, he's been able to give you about 12 points per game. It is a Longwood team that they both turn the ball over a ton and they generate a lot of turnovers. So they are the exact opposite of what the Charleston Southern team, a Charleston Southern team that does a great job in terms of taking care of the ball, but they don't generate any turnovers whatsoever. For this Longwood team, they are 315th in all of college basketball in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. On the defensive side of things, they are 67th in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, top 50 mark when they are at home. But for this Longwood team, I think that they're going to have a little bit of a tough time down low with regards to their interior defense. They're outside the top 275 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and in a pressure spot, this is a Longwood team that they shoot about 75.5% the free throw line. Charleston Southern, they do shoot 64% the charity stripe, so that's one thing that's working in their favor. But I do think that Charleston Southern, just with their overall firepower on offense, and this being a Longwood team that's very, very suspect with regards to their guard play. You've had Emmanuel Richards be a guy that's been able to step up with about 9 points per contest, but outside of Hutchinson, you really don't have a lot to be able to help them out in the backcourt. I do think that this is a Charleston Southern bunch that gets the job done. 1 to lay up to 4.5 with Charleston Southern, 5.5 or more to get the points with Longwood, 152.5 or less, and on the over 153.5 or higher, the under, and that'll wrap things up for the Friday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever you get podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one or two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @NGU_D1. Keep in mind, letters CM, they mean does not matter, so per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And I'm with you guys every single day, giving you picks and analysis on every single game, every single day. So I'll be back with you once you get them out. Thank you.